Many years ago, in the beautiful town of Ikeja, there lived a man named Dele who believed life was a stage and he was the main actor. And so, every little thing he did had to come with noise. If Dele was polishing his shoes, he would hum loudly as if he was preparing for a presidential inauguration. If he was ironing his shirts, he would whistle and announce, "This my conference tomorrow will change my destiny." And if he was dragging his small box across the corridor, he would shout, "Make way, international businessman coming through." In truth, Dele worked in a respectable company, but not at the level he bragged about. He was not the CEO, not even the manager. He was only a mid-level staff who sometimes got the chance to follow his superiors for seminars and small conferences. But the way he carried himself, you would think the United Nations was waiting for his speech. Nike, his wife, used to laugh about it at first. When they newly got married, she supported him with everything. She ironed his shirts, packed his bags, and even cooked for him at odd hours whenever he was traveling. She used to believe him when he said, "Nike, my business trip is very important. It is international standard." And she would reply with admiration, "Dele, God bless your hustle." But over the years, she started to notice something strange. For all the trips he bragged about, the money in their account never increased the way his mouth did. And for all the so-called international standard, sometimes he came back with only key holders and cheap biros as souvenirs. In the compound, the neighbors knew Dele as the traveling man because every month they would hear the sound of him dragging box. He would greet them loudly, "Good evening, my people. I am off to Abuja again for a conference." And the neighbors would smile politely, but once he turned his back, they would scoff. Now, wow, this man, they travel like fly, but his car never gets full tank before. Sometimes, when he returned from trips, he would sit in front of his house with crossed legs and begin to boast. "The directors love me. They said I was the star of the show." Nike would roll her eyes silently because she knew the only show he starred in was clapping for the actual speaker. Still, Dele carried himself like a peacock. He sprayed so much perfume that makes the whole corridor smell like a cosmetic shop. And he would walk in and out of their room rehearsing speeches no one asked for. "Nike, watch me, oh," he would say. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you." He would pause and grin. "That is how I command the room." Nike would laugh until tears came out, whispering under her breath, "Dele, I am sure it is only in your dreams you have stood before panels before." But she kept quiet most of the time because arguing with Dele was like pouring water inside baskets. He always believed he was right, and his pride made him blind. However, what he didn't know was that Nike was starting to get tired and was thinking of a way to end the charade once and for all, as she had heard enough of his noise to know that Dele's mouth was faster than his reality. This latest trip was to Abuja, and it was one of those routine conferences the company held where only a handful of staff were needed. But Dele always found a way to add his name to the list. Before, sometimes he would volunteer to assist with logistics just so he could attend. Other times, he would claim his department must be represented, and if all else failed, he would beg a senior colleague to squeeze him in. See, the truth was that these trips were not necessary for his role, and they did nothing to improve his career. But Dele loved the performance. He loved the airport pictures, the hotel breakfast, and the chance to wear suits and parade like an international consultant. Nike had done her calculations many times, and she had noticed how much the trips drained their finances. By the time Dele bought extra new clothes, new shoes, booked private taxi rides, and returned with one or two items he claimed were business expenses, their monthly savings almost shrank. Yet, anytime she mentioned it, Dele would flare up. "Nike, you don't understand. These trips are investments. Do you know how many directors are noticing me? In fact, my promotion is around the corner." The night before the trip, Dele was in full form. He polished his shoes 3 times, sprayed half a bottle of perfume until the room smelled as if 10 people had bathed in it, and stood in front of the mirror adjusting his tie. Even though the trip was still hours away, he packed his expensive black suitcase neatly, folding shirts as if he was packing for the president's inauguration. Every few minutes, he would brag, "Nike, tomorrow is big oh, this conference is the real deal. The directors will see me and say, Dele, you are the future of this company." Nike only smiled and said, "No problem, best wishes," because she was tired. She was tired of his empty boasts, tired of his financial recklessness, and tired of carrying the burden silently while he enjoyed unnecessary drama. So when he finally lay down to sleep, still mumbling about future contracts in his dream, Nike quietly rose, carried the suitcase Dele had packed, and took it to the storeroom to unpack. She poured the contents out and instead filled it with her own masterpiece: 2 faded singlets with holes at the armpits, 1 big frying pan wrapped in newspaper, a nylon bag of garri tied like precious cargo, a wrapper her mother had left behind years ago, 1 huge boxer short with the elastic gone weak, the kind that could slip down from your waist if not held, and for good measure, 1 cooking spoon. She zipped it carefully and placed it right by the door where Dele had kept the suitcase. Then she carried the real contents of the bag and hid it behind a stack of boxes in the storeroom. She dusted her hands, returned to bed, and smiled in the darkness. The next morning, Dele woke up early, whistling and pacing about as if he had an appointment with the president himself. He put on his freshly ironed suit, adjusted his tie again, and announced loudly, "Nike, when I come back from this trip, everything will change. Do you know how many directors are coming? Do you know how many senators will attend? This conference is not small, oh. I am representing the company." Nike replied cheerfully, "You are truly the pillar of Nigeria." Dele laughed proudly and dragged the suitcase without even looking inside. Look at me now, international man. See you later, my wife. When I return, we will celebrate big things." He marched out like a conquering hero with his suitcase rattling behind him, not knowing that he was dragging his disgrace in a bag. Nike stood at the door watching him. She shook her head slowly and muttered under her breath, "Dele, you are going for conference indeed. This one will be your conference of shame." That morning, the airport was full of people dragging their bags, shouting at porters and rushing to catch flights. Dele walked in like a king arriving at his coronation, dragging the suitcase whose contents Nike had swapped. His shoes shone so brightly that you could almost see your face on them, and his perfume trailed behind him like a banner announcing, "International businessman has arrived." He spotted 2 of his colleagues by the check-in counter and waved with the confidence of a man who thought the world was clapping for him. "Gentlemen, are you ready for this great conference? By God's grace, our company will not remain the same after today." One of the colleagues, Kunle, laughed and said, "Dele, you and this your big talks. We are just going for a normal seminar, not world summit." But Dele raised his chin proudly and replied, "Kunle, you don't understand though. It is in small seminars that big opportunities come. Mark my words, promotion is close." They laughed and shook their heads. Soon, it was time for the routine luggage check. Everyone placed their bags on the table as the officers began unzipping, one after the other. Laptops, crisp shirts, official files, and polished shoes were revealed from his colleagues' bags. Then, it was Dele's turn. He smiled widely, stepped forward, and dropped his black suitcase with flair. "Be careful with that," he warned the officer. "Important documents are inside." The officer nodded and unzipped the bag. However, the silence that followed was heavy enough to cut with a knife. Out of the suitcase rolled a frying pan that landed on the floor with a loud metallic clang. The sound echoed across the hall and everyone turned their heads towards Dele. "What is this?" the officer asked, frowning in confusion. He put his hand inside and pulled out a faded singlet with holes under the armpits, holding it up like evidence in court. Dele's colleagues exploded in laughter. Ha! Dele, are you going to cook for us in Abuja? One of them shouted. The other person added, so this is the big deal you've been bragging about? Dele's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. No, wait. No, that is not, I don't understand. But the officer was not finished. He pulled out the big nylon of Gary and waved it for everyone to see. Oga, you are traveling with foodstuffs. Is it for a conference or boarding school? The crowd at the airport, passengers and staff alike, began to laugh openly. People pointed fingers and shook their heads. Then, like the final blow, the officer dragged out the oversized boxer shorts with slack elastic and held it high. What do we call this? He asked, raising one eyebrow. By now, Dele's face was red with embarrassment. He stammered, No, this is not my bag. There must be a mix-up somewhere. But his colleagues were bent over, laughing until tears streamed down their faces. Dele the chef, one of them shouted, international cook. We should call you frying pan ambassador. Another one added cruelly, Dele, your promotion is indeed close. Promotion to head of kitchen staff. The laughter was too much that even the officer checking the bag could not keep a straight face. He giggled as he zipped the bag back up and pushed it towards Dele. Oga, please carry your luggage and move. Dele dragged the suitcase away shamefully. The perfume that had once announced his arrival now seemed to mock him as it hung in the air like shame. Everywhere he turned, people were pointing, giggling and shaking their heads. His colleagues teased him for the rest of the morning, saying, Dele, don't forget to use your wrapper when it gets cold in Abuja, and please share your Gary with us during lunch break. Dele sat stiffly in his chair, biting his lips and wishing the ground would open and swallow him. By the time he returned from his trip, his steps were no longer as loud as they used to be. The suitcase that he once used to pull proudly behind him was now dragged quietly like a stubborn goat that refused to move. His chest, which he used to puff out like a proud cock, was flat, and his perfume bottle was still half full because he had not bothered to spray it at all. Nike was waiting for him at the door with a calm smile that made Dele nervous. She did not collect his suitcase from him. She simply stepped aside and said, welcome, traveler. How was your great conference? Dele coughed, adjusted his collar and muttered, it was fine. Nike smiled more. Did the director see you? Did they clap for you as you predicted? Dele looked away. They saw me, he mumbled, but his voice lacked confidence. Nike pulled out a chair for him, placed a plate of food on the table, and sat across from him. For a while, silence filled the room except for the sound of the spoon against the plate. Then Nike spoke. Dele, do you now see that pride is heavier than luggage? When you carry it too much, it will disgrace you at the checkpoint of life. Dele paused and fumed. But he couldn't continue. His throat felt tight. Nike continued, you force yourself on trips that don't add anything to this house. You spend money we don't have just to look important, and you make noise as if the world will collapse without you. Meanwhile, your children's shoes are getting smaller, and I am calculating food money like a trader in the market every day. Who are you really trying to impress, Dele? The world or yourself? Dele dropped his spoon. He wanted to argue, but the memory of the frying pan rolling across the airport floor silenced him. He wanted to boast, but the laughter of his colleagues echoed in his head like a bell. He sighed deeply and covered his face with his hands. Nike, I have been foolish. Nike nodded slowly. Yes, you have, but foolishness can end the day a man decides to learn. Humility is not shame, Dele. It is wisdom. You don't need to prove yourself with false importance. You are my husband. If you walk small, you still are my husband. If you talk small, you are still my husband. But when you lie to yourself and try to be bigger than you are, you will end up looking smaller in everyone's eyes. Her words pierced deeper into him, and Dele sat quietly with slumped shoulders, not trying to defend himself at all. That night, Dele did not rehearse speeches in front of the mirror. He did not spray perfume until the house choked. He did not boast about directors or promotion. He simply removed his suit, hung it, and told Nike softly, "Thank you for being patient with me. Nike smiled. It's fine. Just be a husband I can respect, not a clown the world would laugh at. From then on, the noise in Dele's house reduced like a radio that had finally found the right station. Dele no longer strutted around the compound dragging suitcases at every opportunity. The neighbors noticed the silence immediately. One of them whispered, "Where is our international man? He has not announced any conference lately." Another one added, "Maybe promotion carried him abroad permanently." But the truth was that Dele has decided to sit down. He still went to work as usual. He still polished his shoes in the morning, but the endless bragging about directors and trips stopped. He no longer begged his way onto every company list for travel, and even when they asked for volunteers for the next seminar, Dele quietly kept his hand down. His colleagues raised their eyebrows surprised, but he only smiled and said, "Let the people that need it go. I have done enough." At home, Nike noticed the biggest change. Instead of rushing to pack for another unnecessary trip, Dele began to spend evenings with her and the children. One night, he actually sat on the floor helping his son with homework. The boy was so shocked that he asked, "Daddy, are you not traveling tomorrow?" Dele laughed and said, "No, my son, I am traveling nowhere. This is my important meeting." Nike watched him from the doorway and her heart softened because she knew that life had already delivered the best lesson to him. Sometimes, when Dele's pride tried to rise again, he would suddenly remember the sound of the frying pan hitting the airport floor, that loud clang that silenced his mouth, and he would clear his throat, lower his shoulders, and choose humility instead. One Saturday evening, as they sat together on the veranda sipping zobo, Nike teased him, "Dele, it's been long you carried suitcase, so don't you miss the airport?" Dele laughed and shook his head. Nike, I miss nothing, no. If you experienced what I did, you too will sit down." They both laughed and continued sipping their zobo. Thank you for watching the story. Kindly share your thoughts about the story with me in the comment section. Give the story a thumbs up and share the story out with your loved ones. Subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories. Thank you and remain blessed.